Have you ever wanted to make one of those hole-eating type games? They work by using a very clever trick and are very easy to implement in Godot. So let's do that. The first step is our hole. Because the hole is going to move, we need some way to draw a hole inside our floor mesh. Luckily, that is very easy to do now. So let's start by adding a new CSG cylinder or a cylinder mesh. This is going to be the top of the hole, the area we want to cut. We just want a circular shape, so I'll reduce its height until it's barely visible and increase the sides to 12. Now let's create a new material and make sure this mesh doesn't have a shadow, since this is going to be the open section of the hole. For the material, we are going to enable no depth test to make it always be drawn, and under stencil, select custom and set it to right to the reference of 1, always. What this does is create a mask. Any place our mesh is drawn is going to paint the stencil with the value of 1, and because it is always drawn, we always get a mask where the hole in the mesh should be. Next, we need to make the floor use this stencil mask. Right now, the floor just uses a colored texture. To make a hole based on the stencil mask, we first need to enable transparency. Then set the depth draw mode to always, so it still works the same as an opaque object. And under stencil, enable custom, but this time we set it to read the reference 1 with not equals. What this means is that it will only draw the floor where the stencil is not equal to 1, which is this white color displayed here. But it doesn't seem to be quite working yet. There are a couple of reasons for that. Inside our whole material, we need to change the render priority here. It is important that the mesh that writes to the stencil is rendered before the one that's reading from it. But we still see the same. This can be deceiving. The floor is already being cut, but that just means we are seeing the cylinder behind it. So you just need to set its transparency to 1.0, and there you go, we have a hole. Even if the mesh is not visible, the stencil on it is still being drawn. Just note that this transparency slider does not work for mobile, but you can set the material as transparent and use the albedo alpha to 0. Now let's rename this and reduce its height so it's basically just a flat plane. We can now move our hole around and see below the floor. But right now, our floor is looking very flat. So let's add another CSG cylinder, set its size to 12, and move it just below the hole. Create a new material, and under transparency, set the cool mode to front. And in fact, I'll load the floor material here just so I have some texture. And change its color to a yellow tint, just so it's easier to see the hole below. And a quick tip here, if you are having a hard time seeing the color change, you can temporarily disable the view gizmos and see the full color without the overlay. Just don't forget to re-enable them later. But now, you got a hole with some depth, we can move around. The next step is making objects fall through it. Here, my CSG floor has the use collision enabled. So let's try to add some rigid body objects now. I'll put them a bit above the ground and test the scene. And as expected, they stop at the ground level. We need the floor collisions to also have a hole cut into them. But before that, here's a common issue you might see. If you try to add a collision shape now above the floor, you'll quickly notice something is very strange. The collision gizmo is not showing up properly. It shows the gizmos on the apple, but not on the floor. That is because we made the whole floor a transparent material, and this caused it to be drawn after Godot's actual gizmos. A fix for that is setting the render priority to -128, the last one. Common gizmos are drawn at -127, and the selection overlay at -128. So like this, we can see the gizmos back then. And let's not forget to update our whole stencil to -128, so it is drawn before the floor. Now we can see the gizmos again. Now, for the hole collisions, cutting the physics mesh is possible, but very slow and can cause some strange problems. So a clever trick used here is to have a hole collision act as a second floor object with a hole, and move that around, swapping the object's collision masks so they only collide with one or the other. Since our hole is going to move, let's create a new rigid body 3D, and add the meshes inside it. Then, we need the collision mesh for the floor with a hole. You can take your time and make a precise one. But for here, I will start by adding a new mesh and creating a torus mesh, and set its size so it loosely resembles the outside of the hole shape. Then I'll move it down so it barely shows up, and use the Mesh menu to create a collision shape. Because the hole is going to move, make sure to select multiple convex. Tri-mesh shapes have serious precision errors on moving objects, and should only be used for static objects. This will create a few collision shapes, roughly the shape of the hole, and you can duplicate and rearrange them a bit so it more closely resembles the hole shape. Then, add a few more collision shapes, create a box shape 3D, and put them in the four corners outside of the hole, to simulate the floor. Just make sure the four collisions are aligned and you should be okay. With some adjusting and the collisions done, let's rename the mesh to lip, and adjust its size so it's just outside the hole, just to improve the visuals a bit. Add a material and some color, and you should be good to go. Now comes the important part. Select the whole rigid body and open the collision section. We need it to be in its own physics layer. So right-click the layer 5 and rename it to hole. Add the layer 5 and remove the 1. You can think of the collision layer as what the object is. Since this is our hole, it should be in the whole collision layer, and the mask is what it detects or collides with. And since we don't want our hole to fall, set the gravity scale to 0. And let's add our lemon back to the game. The lemon collision mask here is 1, which means it collides with layer 1 objects, the floor right now. But if we set this to 5, it will only collide with the hole colliders and ignore the floors. But because our hole has some floors beside it, it still looks like it stays on the floor. And moving it just a bit, it now falls through the hole. Now all we need is an area to detect when the object should swap layers. So let's add a new area, create a new collision shape, create a sphere shape, and increase it so it's just a bit less than the floor. We need to make sure when the object hits the area, it is already fully on top of this box. You can adjust this depending on the size of the objects your game is going to have. Now let's rename this whole body and add a new script. We'll create an export flags 3D physics var hole flags, and another one named normal flags. So when objects get closer to the hole, it should collide with the hole and other objects, the layer 2 we are going to use. And when leaving the area, other objects and the floor. Now let's select the area node and connect the body enter signal and the body exit signal. And here, we just need to check if the body is a rigid body 3D and change its collision mask to be the hole flags, and set it back to the normal flags when it leaves the area. I've added some lemons. The objects here are going to be on the physics layer 2 and collide with the floor layer 1 and other objects layer 2. And if we test this now, it still doesn't work. We forgot to set layers for the actual area 3D. So make sure it has the mask of objects layer 2 to properly detect objects. Now our hole is gone. The other lemons pushed it along, and we don't want that. So make sure the whole rigid body does not collide with anything. The lemons will still collide with it. It just won't receive collision responses. And now, everything seems to be working. But to test things further, let's add a quick mouse movement code. And indeed, we can move the hole and gather fruits. Everything seems okay. But a common problem here is objects falling through when exiting the whole area. It doesn't always happen, but we still need to fix this. The reason for that is the misaligned floor levels. If you see here, the hole's floor is a few inches below the actual floor. And you can also visibly see too, when the objects enter the whole area, they fall just a bit, which is not a problem. But when exiting, they are below the ground. And then the physics needs to decide if it wants to push the objects up or down. So to avoid this, let's make sure both our floors are mostly on the same heights. And like that, we no longer have falling objects. We can clearly see the hidden physics are now working. And just to finish things, let's make sure the objects are deleted after falling in. Create a new area, add a collision shape, create a box 3D, make it a big size and put it below the hole. Then, Just create a script for the area and make it destroy objects it touches. Just make sure the mask layer detects the falling objects, and now we don't have objects falling forever anymore. And as an extra, you can add some shader and effects for the hole too, and a spawner for the fruits. But that's it. As always, if you'd like to support me, you can get the project files on Patreon. Now we can start making and having fun with your own hole-eating games. I hope you liked this video, and until next time.